Good afternoon. I am Anto Budiojo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern to figure out the future for smart buildings. So it's great to have you here on Canada Day, which is today. And it's also the week where we have July 4th. So congratulations to Canada, the US, and everybody. We are listed on mondaylive.org, just in case you're wondering who we are. And just to make a note that the views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. Keep that in mind. Please do post questions, comments, and other interesting chit chat on the Zoom chat. It's much more. It's great to have this as an interactive kind of activity. So looking forward to that. So this being the 1st of July, we are starting a brand new theme, having discussed a lot of things over the past few months, leading up to last week when we were sort of talking around the presentation that we did at DrillCon, really about the fact that a key problem that we're really trying to solve is how to make all of the silos in a building work together. So we thought we'll set the theme for July to be exactly that, integrating building silos. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes. So as our agenda, normal chit chat, and then talking about building silos. What we want to focus on today is really trying to understand what are the common silos that we all find in our experience, and also obviously in different types of buildings. So looking forward to that conversation. But first, hand it over to Mr. Sinclair.
Thanks, Anto. As we were chatting before, I'm coming back to my farming roots as with haystacks and silos. I'm kind of thinking the next thing's going to be a tractor pulling a data train or something like that. But it's kind of interesting. We're definitely going back to our roots. The other thing I'd like to point out is the slide that popped up this month is we were kind of shouting in the dark for the last 3 years as Monday Live and kind of exploring a lot of these new ideas. It's interesting to see I believe it's a ripple effect of what we've been talking about and what people have been working on in other directions. And so I've attempted to try and bring a lot of those concepts together. And so if we start over in the corner here, I guess that's not, it's on my screen, but not on your screen. But anyway, on the left-hand corner, that's all of our sessions from AHR. And then the next one is basically Linux, I always say it wrong, Linux from Steve. He's got some good comments there, and he's certainly supporting it. Mark has got a great post talking about his operational technology landscape changing, and that's a good read there. The automated it does not equal smart. That's basically a summary of last week's summary of what happened in Tampa. We also have posted this, what is UDMI? It's been kicking around for a while in the background. There's a couple of things that have kind of brought it a little bit more to the front. Google was using it in some of their presentations, I believe, in Tampa, and they won the best of the AI intelligent buildings. And then the other thing is some of the control companies seem to be poking around, looking at it. There was something called a UDMI summit. And if you click on that article, you can find out a little bit about that. And inside of that, touching some of the people that were involved in that, I got connected to this DBC, the Digital, what's it called? Digital Buildings Council. And if you click on it, it's interesting because they are doing, they're non-for-profit that is doing something similar to us. So I don't know if we should join them or just take a look at what they're doing. So I think that's the news. That is the news. Back to you.
The DBC is something that's popped up, as far as I can tell, in the UK.
Correct.
Roger, I don't know whether you know about that at all, but that's relatively new. Maybe you can dig around and see if there's sort of substance behind it.
It's not particular, it's not solely focused at buildings, it's focused at all digital enhancement of buildings.
Yeah, I haven't seen
Uh,
much.
Digital enhancement of anything.
Related to buildings.
Yeah, well, no, I don't think they don't limit themselves as we do. We kind of always talk about buildings, but I think they're talking about the whole digitalization process. Is my sense. Anyway, I'm not sure. We need to know more about them.
Yeah, that'd be good to know more.
I just read the About tab.
Okay. All right, let's move on. So I had a couple of things just on the sort of office real estate sort of changes. The last couple of weeks, I'm starting to see sort of talk of the Great Reset, which I think we've all been sort of anticipating since the pandemic ended. So that seems to be coming to a head in San Francisco, which is kind of interesting. And the thing that's driving it, and I think we know this as well, is that the lost revenue from the city's perspective is causing really a real sort of major problems. Anyway, so that's interesting. Actually, a couple of articles there, both from the San Francisco Standard. I think that's the name of the publication. The other thing on the right is this IoT analytics firm that does this analysis every quarter on what the CEOs talked about. And this is kind of the graphic that they've created. I've got a bigger version of that in a second, so we can dig into it. But the other thing is obviously interesting, and again, this is not surprising that the AI continues to increase in terms of that CEOs are talking about. Again, not surprising. But when you look at this, which is a bigger version of the actual graphic, it's kind of interesting. AI is obviously everywhere, but it goes beyond AI. There's the AI itself, and there's sort of thinking about the LLMs that's sort of coming up. Not necessarily what we know now, so there's anticipation of that. And then there's this sort of big blob of data center related stuff, which is kind of interesting because that's really what's needed for AI to operate. I think we're hearing in the news huge amounts of money being spent on AI-centric data centers. So it sort of made it here into the CEO's consciousness, as it were. But I also found this interesting. There's this sort of clump of industrial AI, which if we fit anywhere, it'd probably be in there. So that's kind of interesting. And all the other sort of things that sort of been focused on since the recession, since the pandemic is sort of diminishing, which is also interesting. So I don't know, I can leave this up and see if anybody has any thoughts about this. So the way to read this is that this is the change. This is the change from last quarter in terms of how something is now being talked about more than last quarter. This is the importance of that keyword, which is really how often it's being said, is kind of my understanding. So
it's interesting. There's nothing in the top right-hand corner, Anto, but usually that's when there's a lot of hype about something, right? And it's which is where ChatGPT and other things have been previously, but obviously slipping down the charts at the moment.
yeah, and this, as Scott just pointed out, that you have to be careful on the scale. The scale, obviously, on the across the bottom here, it goes all the way to 100%. And but anyway, beyond that, there's no other comments on that. We're still obviously sort of reflecting on the session that we did in RailComm 2 weeks ago, and there's the link, and if somebody can post it on chat, that would be great. It's still available from BIG that actually did that. So thank you for them. Anything else you want to add to that, Rick, from a C4SV perspective?
No, just it was it's been fun to get a bunch of feedback, follow-up emails going from people that were either at the session or that we talked to at Realcomm, and to see again that people got what we were presenting, and so that's been encouraging for us to then go ahead and keep pushing. And maybe we'll talk about it a little bit, but the coalition's going to continue to explore the relationship with the Linux Foundation. We're officially a member of the Linux Foundation now, and we're going to keep pursuing more involvement with that organization.
Yeah. Cool. So the link board, as always, remind you it's there. And is there anything else we need to talk about before we move on? Hearing none, let us move on. So integrating building silos. Sort of obviously we know about the silos, and here are sort of here is a list of silos. Whenever I've done this, and whenever other people have done, sort of try to categorize all of the silos, they never get it right, and I'm sure I didn't get it right here. So just sort of take it as a sort of as a perspective. But really sort of the question is, what are the silos that we see a lot in buildings? And if we're going to think about integrating all of these systems that are in these silos, clearly we understand the controls and automation side of things, because this is really this group's sort of core strength. But where else should we be focusing to actually understand how information flow across silos can actually be beneficial to building owners and operators? I think that's kind of the question. So I'll leave this up for a bit, and we can open it up to discussion.
I think one thing that kind of strikes me a little, Anto, is that you can categorize them in sort of construction phase and post-construction phase, because a number of these are client orientated once they've occupied the building. You don't always get, the ERP and CRM systems and the social networks and all the other things until someone's occupied the building. So how we make contact with those, even the CMMS comes afterwards for for the facility management side, visitor management, and all those things are kind of things that come after the construction phase, right? So how you get that continuation on after, for instance, the bit that we're in, the BAS controls and automation and the lighting and the stuff that's on-prem, is I guess an open question, and obviously there is a split of what is on-prem and what's not, and what certainly CMMS you've seen more and more where people are making the maintenance management package dynamic. Certainly people at Facilio and others where they're reaching out and being able to actually get live maintenance done, and being able to actually then create the work, the worksheet and get down to site perhaps even before the customer knows. So we know there's huge advantages, but it's how do you gel that before and after bit.
Yeah, and you would have noticed that I agree with you. As a nod to that, the design and construction is way over to the left. So that's kind of that one half that you were talking about, but obviously it's not fair from a distribution perspective.
Yeah.
So you went straight for CMMS as being kind of, and
I think it's cool. I mean, in commercial buildings or even other stuff where people are monitoring and managing sites, and certainly where you're getting multiple sites now, I think it's key, because a lot of the people who occupy the buildings just defer the responsibility to the FM company or the people who are actually looking after the maintenance of their sites. And a lot of those guys, are obviously now using, computerized maintenance management. Or it's got many different names, but it's called IWMS, Integrated Works Management Systems, which is trying to pull some of these things in, like billing, tenant billing and other things. But I do think it probably is quite key to actually bringing a lot of these things together, because the FM company does get very, very close to the customer, closer than maybe the guys on the left.
So the other question I had when I was doing this is, should I actually have a silo labeled FM? And I ended up not having one because I
Well,
couldn't
it's a
quite.
tool, isn't it? It's like the others. They're all functions as opposed to companies, So I think it's more about the bits and pieces that are there. Yes, there is an FM does sit above that. But whether each of those have separate entities above them, or they are the actual products that are used to actually tie everything in, is another thing.
Would it be worthwhile to show that there's at least some of the silos, or maybe even all of the silos, have sub-silos inside of them? Because that's another problem, is you kind of put it into one category, which it definitely falls, but inside of that, you may have 3 or 4 cloud services feeding that. So they are in fact little silos, sub-silos or sub-clouds.
So what would make us what would make a super silo? Let's call it that. Sort of a mega silo that has other silos. Is FM a super silo that has CMMS, space utilization, other things? Is that the way to think about it?
So if I apologize for being late, but I was, emailing you, Anto, about this, and in thinking about this since the email exchange and having gone through this a bunch of times in different organizations, what I think there could be clarifications for these silo names for sure, because some are systems, some are actions, some are application, and it's not consistent necessarily what each one of these silos is. Because, for instance, social networks, that whether or not it's applicable here, that is a completely different beast than lighting control. And what I was thinking might really help our thinking in all of this is actually go to a level up, because all of these silos can gather data. All of these silos can provide some information based upon that data, and in limited ways provide some level of insight from that information about their each given silo. So it's that pyramid of data, information, insight, and wisdom. But very few of these provide any wisdom whatsoever. And so what seems to make sense is that we really divide this into the 3 groups that need the information, insight, and wisdom from these systems. And to me, those 3 groups are the tenants and the people who are occupying the building and who work there or live there or whatever it is. So the tenants. Then you have operations, which include not just property management, but also the facility managers and engineering and the fitness center folks and the parking management companies, all of those operational members. And then you have asset managers who actually approve the capital plan and only care about net operating income, hold time, and return on capital, basically. And so those 3 groups all need information from these various silos, but they have usually very different takes on what is information they care about, what is insight they need to do their job, and what is wisdom that could really help them beat the market or outperform. And you can outperform in tenant experience with amenities and touchless, experience, whatever. You can outperform the market with operations and supporting more assets with fewer people, and you can outperform the market financially by having a better return on capital, etc. So each one of those three groups need information and interoperable information from these different silos, but each one needs a different combination and for different reasons for their point of view. And so what I was thinking, instead of trying to group silos together, let's keep filtering and working on these silos and start instead to improve what the silo namings are potentially. And then let's look at that data and information you can get from each one of these silos, and then see how that goes out to those three user groups or something along those lines.
I mean, I would think that that's a great idea to try to think about this from a data and information perspective. So love that thought.
One piece I see missing is grid interaction. And
Right here.
It's there.
good, okay, but the problem with it is it touches every one of those silos, right? Because if grid interaction calls for a demand change,
Sure.
it's going to talk to lighting, and so
Well,
It
that's
has
what
a
we're trying to
relationship.
figure out. That's
It has
what
a
we're trying to figure
relationship. Yeah, but it has a relationship that may occur not so much at a combining of silos. It'll actually almost be a direct connection. So grid interaction is going to have to talk to EV charging, is going to have to talk to lighting and the mechanical system. And the relationships are complex and changing. So there is a bit of chatter going on by design between the silos. I'm not sure how to show that graphically.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, Ken. And one of the other things that is like, where's IT and where's connectivity?
Yes.
And that's the same type of thing. And also, if you want to build, a lot of people are hot on the concept of an independent data layer. That would go across all of these things as well.
So, David, to your point, and also just in general about how we're defining the silos, I strongly consider how we incorporate the CSI master format in the terminology they use, because anything we come up with, there's a well-established procedures and vernacular that they have established in the industry. So if we take all this effort and we bring it to the engineering community, and they're sitting saying, well, what do you put in division 23, 24, 26, 27, 28? What have we done? Right?
So Steve, I completely,
so as an example, you show control and automation.
Yeah, we're in complete agreement. I
Yeah.
totally makes sense, because you have mechanical engineers that do the mechanical spec.
Right.
That's Div 23. Yeah, and same thing with lighting is Div 26. Energy management would be Div 26. I think that makes a lot of sense, because it's kind of building upon the industry silos that are in place. And master format is half of what CSI does. The other half is uniformat. And I completely agree about the master format elements. What's interesting is uniformat, because uniformat has to do with your wall assemblies, your curtain wall assemblies, your ceiling assemblies. All of those assemblies, which are in Revit and BIM, have uniformat numbers or can fall into uniformat categorization. And this is where the BIM concept with uniformat assemblies complements the systems that are master format. When you have, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, security, fire, life safety, those are all master format systems.
Right.
We then have the complementary uniformat assemblies, and those need tracking just like the systems do, because you
Okay.
need to know the membrane on your roof. What's the warranty period? Who holds that warranty? Do you call the manufacturer? Do you call the contractor? When should you be capital planning to redo that membrane on the roof? All of these physical elements that are in essence static, non-system elements still need tracking in the same way as well.
Yeah, and I think that's great, but it points out a distinction that certain systems are going to generate sensor-based data, if you will, or runtime data, whatever you
Exactly.
want to
Yep.
call it, right? And then other things like the Unicode that you just
Yep.
mentioned, like a
Uniformat.
ceiling and a
Yep.
roof, is not going to have any kind of
But
sensors
this,
associated necessarily. Sometimes like a leak sensor, something like
but
that.
you're
Yeah.
completely correct.
Yeah.
But here's the to me, if there's one thing I'd love to get across to everyone, is that time matters for all of it.
Right.
And
Right.
so with the building systems, you have master data, which doesn't change.
Mhm.
And then there's transactional data, which is your energy consumption or water consumption or whatever IoT sensors or metering you're doing. That's all transactional data. And yes,
Right.
you're completely correct that the systems are generating a lot of transactional data.
Actual data. Right.
Static systems don't do that, but
Mhm.
you still need to track when was it installed
Well,
and when
yeah.
is that warranty up, and no one's tracking that anywhere.
Hmm.
And so by locking all of this into the time continuum, you really have an opportunity to bring this stuff together.
Yeah. It's funny when I listen to this, it reminds me of sort of Six Sigma uh, exercises to look at a process and define where the sources of data are, what are all the actions that need to be done, mapping it all out, and then looking for the best flow possible and where automation might benefit. So I really view this as like a Six Sigma exercise ultimately, and it's not trivial what we're talking about doing here in that regard.
Nope. And what's interesting is right now, buildings are, when you buy an old vintage car, if you get a 3-ring binder with all the service manuals, the service history, when the oil changes happened, it was all done by a dealer or whatever, it really establishes the value of the car. And when you look at physical buildings, we do not do the same thing. And there really is a massive opportunity to take that approach, but also to take it to the next level. Where, on the extreme side, you could see airplanes like with Rolls-Royce and GE tracking engines in real time while the planes are flying. But then on another level and on the ground, my colleague Rich and I are talking about this, where Caterpillar tractor and John Deere, exactly how every subsystem in the tractor or in that heavy machinery is operating. And when it's going to need to be serviced, when you're going to need, like it's going to be this 4-week window in 8 months when we're going to need to take it out to do this, and this.
Right.
And right now, manufacturing facilities and assembly plants run that way, but normal buildings don't. And it's not been cost effective historically, except for, there are exceptions, and Jim Young probably has a few, and Tracy has a few. But healthcare is one where they do need to track all this stuff because of the air circulation and the health safety requirements and infection control. But by and large, the opportunity is taking a much more detailed approach to this, but it has to somehow be as easier than the current approach. And therein lies the rub. That software can fix. Hey, great.
which is what we're setting out to show that we've started doing.
Yep.
The idea of breaking up some of the silos into sub ones, and Kimon mentioned it the first on the far left, BIM, and then just like almost trivializing the massive industry that is design and construction.
Right.
How many silos are under that? 8, maybe. So the other thing that I'm hearing being described is that each of these different industries, some of them are actually quite huge. They are digitizing getting their digital act together as we speak. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to take advantage of the fact that an awful lot of these industries have started to go cloud native following the Linux Foundation roadmap. We're trying to figure out which ones are going to be the ones that are going to be the most valuable for bringing the owner, occupier, and the operator the sorts of decision-making tools that they need to be more efficient. And so the digital transformation of our digital transformation of everything on the planet is well underway. They're getting their taxonomies and they're getting their acts together. How do we take advantage of that to take it all to the next level? And how do we become an example of the fact that we're doing it? We are showing how different bits of data and the different connections can be really, really valuable. And let's be a model for it. And show a way to do it.
I'm wondering if there's a hierarchy play in here, that are all these silos exactly equal?
No.
Yeah, like
No.
I'm wondering, should there be like a layer of silos above? Basically, the other thing, of course, is this issue that some silos talk to all silos need to, or they.
Well,
Well,
and
I think
this
think
is
that's
where.
to me,
Sorry,
saying that is
Anto.
dangerous, because I think if we're going to create a way for these silos to the silos that need to communicate with other silos, we should make it so that all silos can communicate with all silos. Then that question goes away.
Granted, but we need that
Right.
next graphic to show some examples of that, I think.
I'm actually
So-
quite comfortable with the silos that are here. Certainly, there are others that could be added for manufacturing or process systems that could be in a building. But to me, what's important is actually teasing out how well this framework works by looking at some applications. And I look forward to, I think that will inform us as to what the silos should look like underneath, is if we go to look at value propositions as to how those connection profiles would be made across the silos. To me, that would be the most interesting thing.
Yeah, and I think
Agree.
I think you're right, Jim. I think from my perspective, I think you got a lot of kind of on the left here, real-time systems, that either generate or hold some data that the guys a lot on the right would actually benefit from. I wouldn't suggest all of them could actually interact or get a benefit from, but I think certainly if you look at, the bit we're familiar with, the BAS or control side, it already has its fingers in many pies, like monitoring the lighting or the fire and the access control and stuff. So it's kind of a little bit back to what I said earlier. Maybe someone at least needs to lead the charge, because some of them may be smaller. I'm not suggesting, Anto, that they shouldn't all be interactive, but somehow someone's got to actually lead the charge with this. And I think if the softer data type systems on the right were able to get access to some of the data, it would certainly improve their operations. A little bit like I was saying earlier with the CMMS, you can have dynamic maintenance management systems, shipping out works orders before the customer even knows he's got a problem. So there's benefits of that connectivity and interaction, and I think it's you know, some of these are real time and some benefit from the data that could be generated from them.
So, right,
I
I'm
think
sorry, go ahead,
it's,
Tracy.
yeah, I think it's less important or not important what the silos are. In fact, I would argue we should assume an infinite set of silos in a building because we
Yep.
don't know what we don't know. And when you look at this, some of these arguably could be use cases as opposed to subsystems. Also, right? They're pulling data from like decarbonization and ESG potentially is pulling data from several different systems, for instance, already. And I'm on the Jim Lee train here on it. What's really important is identifying use cases where and what data is being shared and how that data is being shared. And that's really where the magic happens here in all this.
Agree. I agree.
I guess what I was going to say next was that to David's point earlier about the different constituencies for the data, the tenants, the asset managers, and the building operators. Might it not make sense to try and create some, I guess could you call them silo committees or a group that goes off and develops a complete example. So let's say you start with HVAC as an example, right? And you then show what data out of HVAC is going to be valuable to those three constituencies. And then to Roger's point, how, in what way, because the data is going to be coming to them in CMMS and in a variety of different application or information management systems on the right, primarily on the right side, right? So you've got the real-time control on the left from the HVAC perspective. The data wants to get to these three different constituencies of users, but how they're going to see the data is going to be in various applications like a CMMS or some kind of a decarbonization ESG application or social networking. Who knows what the apps are? That really doesn't matter. I agree with you in that sense, Tracy. But I think if we went off or maybe got some extra volunteers here to work offline and map this thing out and show a full example of how what we're talking about here, then I think it'll make it a lot easier for us to pitch this and ultimately design the solutions that are going to manifest in the IBB as an example, and specific to the control, to the connection profiles.
So you're sort of implying more of trying to understand the flow of data is kind of how I get it, right? Because
Not just the flow, but where's the value in the data? What data is important to each of these constituencies? So it's not just the flow, but it's also specifically what data do we think is valuable? Because at the end of the day, that's what sells this, right? That's why people spend the money on it. So if we don't identify what we think is the valuable information, we've left out one of the most important ingredients in the success story here.
In my world,
but the thing is that the value of, well, which data is valuable has already been established by the companies that are doing all of this in a proprietary way. Somebody in the chat is talking about it.
Yeah, I was just saying,
this is already being done. This is already being done in a ton of places.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do is we're trying to show that it can be done for more places, more cost effectively, and get more data and maybe get deeper using new modern tools. So that the thing that we're trying to demonstrate isn't that these systems should be connected. We're trying to demonstrate that they should be connected in a new way.
It's, and I would argue that statement is the data from these systems should be made available, is what we're arguing, right?
Yes.
Interoperable,
Because,
right?
Yeah,
Right.
And,
They're
and,
on-
I'm thinking back, while I think there are a lot of applications that have already been done and use cases that have sort of been done through other means, I also think that the world has been limited because it is not easy and obvious to go grab points of data. Go back to what I think it was Jim that was arguing a few weeks ago about, listen, it might only be 1 or 2 pieces of data that you need from any given system here to complete what you're trying to do. We had a customer that was doing fire system monitoring as it pertained to maintaining fire systems and maintenance and inspections and so forth.
Mhm.
And, they needed a few bits of information that were readily available from other systems that would have really completed their application nicely, but it wasn't easy to get those other bits of data. So guess what? They had to throw a whole bunch more hardware and duplicate hardware that already existed in the system, or in the building, I should say. So, I mean, that's the kind of forces that we're fighting here. I think because it hasn't been available, the creativity, the imagination hasn't been really unleashed to really think through some of these use cases yet. Really, ideally, if we could wave a magic wand, we just say, make all data available from all of these silos, and then let the world get creative, right? The ideal situation.
Jim outlined that, I think, in Tampa, in the as part of the presentation in Tampa, about the fact that what we're talking about is not a lot of data. Do you want to sort of recount that, Jim?
Sure.
That's really very important.
I think that a lot of value creation, if we look at anything, iPhone apps, there are small bits of data from disparate sources that create value. And my point of view after 25 years in the analytics business is that if you start from the standpoint that you need to collect all data and store all data in a data lake, it ends up being a fool's errand, because storing all that data, cleansing all that data, understanding all the metadata around it is very difficult. Whereas if you start with applications, as I just mentioned, and you drill down, those applications inform what pieces of data you need to take and what they can do. So when we approach analytics, we start out with our end goal. What is it that we want to diagnose? What is it we want to analyze? And then we do a top-down scaling to see what we want to get and how we want to get it. And the idea that you should have other bits of data available for things that you didn't contemplate, absolutely. But as a starting point, having a roadmap for understanding what you want to do and what you need to get to do it is a top-down way that I think it's worked well for us.
And I would second that heartily. It's figure out the KPIs you need and go down from there. And what are the data sets you need for those KPIs or SLAs or anything like that?
So the complementary thing to this list of silos is a list of applications, right? What is it that you want to do? Where is it that you want to add value?
Yeah.
And
Well,
then
so
Jim,
you would argue that the CMMS is an example of an application, I would assume, right?
It is. But there are others. I think that is a case where the silo is the application, but that could be said really for a lot of silos, Steve, right? So because that's why it's a silo, right? There was enough value concentrated around that area for a solution to arise. Yeah.
But no, I agree with you. I guess that's what I was trying to say. Maybe I didn't say it as well as you now expressed it, but I'm just saying, I think it's exactly the point. What are the applications? Who do the applications serve among the 3 constituency groups? And then what's the minimum data set that those need? To Tracy and Rick's point, they want all data accessible all the time. That's the ideal. I don't disagree with that. I think from a simplification standpoint, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you want to store all that data. It just means that there's a mechanism by which all data is accessible all the time.
Correct.
Which in my mind is what Connection Profiles solves, because you only ask for what you need. You don't try to create a data lake. That's
Right.
the fundamental architectural difference.
And
And
I
certainly
wanna
there are
be
gonna be
sure that
things,
you understood that's what I was advocating. It just needs to be available.
Right.
You don't need to be
Right.
collecting everything.
Right.
Right.
and
So-
as you contemplate these applications, there will be other things that you didn't contemplate, so it needs to
Right.
be flexible so you can get more later.
We do have
I know.
certain templates for applications that are already being done very expensively and very proprietarily that are actually providing value for the people that can afford it. And that would be probably the place I would suggest starting to better understand the value of different types of data is go look at the ones that are already built. Expensive and proprietary, but they're already built. And that's just this whole other world, whether it's architects and engineers and all the BIM stuff, and then all the construction technology that goes in there, or the CMMS world or the IWMS world. But look at some of the stacks that are already built and use some of those as sort of the guides as to what the most valuable data is for better decision making. And we're trying to do the TXO framework also to be able to help kind of give some context to, geez, if I could improve my maintenance efficiency by 10%, what does that equal? Well, it's an easy number to calc. Or if I was able
think
to,
we should start with that TXO, Rick, and then
Yeah.
drill down to see what feeds those elements.
and it's kind of revealing, right? If I can make better use of my personnel for maintenance and extend useful life, that's where the real gold is buried, right? But yeah, using TXO as a way to be able to get a context of the decisions that can be made more better for the owners, occupants, and operators.
Now, do you want to chime in on this? I know that you missed the beginning a little bit,
Yeah,
but
sorry
I think
about
you get what we're talking about.
Customers still get in the way, right? I've always said business would be great without customers or employees. It'd be awesome.
Or vendors.
Or vendors, yes, I'm going to add that one. But yeah, just a couple of takeaways. I think, when you talk about we call those use cases, right? What are the use cases of what you're trying to do? And I think using the TX framework is the right TXO framework is the right to go, because that's what we did, right? We put the effort into creating a TX framework, which identified all the categories of the use cases. It doesn't say what the use cases are, but it gives you the categories that you're looking for, right? Whether it's energy or operations or whatever your category are, right? At least they give you the categories that you can focus on. And I think you can write the use cases around that. And I do also want to concur with Steve's point, right? Rather than, we're not trying to build great data lakes and data cleaning and all that stuff, which has been there, done that. Everyone here on this call has probably been there, done that in some context, right? And no, that hasn't been particularly successful. And then the last comment, and Steve said that, folks have done this with APIs, right? So we know what the use cases are. It's just that the mechanisms of what we've done it for has been, quote unquote, the old fashioned way with APIs and stuff. So we've got a good history and a lot of folks here who could rattle off a lot of the meaningful use cases pretty quickly. I don't think it'll be a big challenge, and then use the TXO as the framework to do that, right? I think that's a good way, to me, of bringing it all back together. People have done this. Each one of us have done this. We've all got a different view of the world, but TXO helps you put it in the right box, right? And then let's see what stands up.
I wonder if focusing on the applications, right, which would be something that is applying a use case, being used in a use case, right, that relates to TXO. But the nice thing about an application is it's very tangible, right? And we can fit it in our heads because we have applications that we use all the time, so we know what applications are. That would seem to be a sort of really useful way of organizing these silos, to actually identify the applications that different people, I think that's what somebody was saying earlier, the three different groups of people would need, and then to figure out
Right.
from those applications what silos would be useful in providing data for those applications. That's really what we want to figure out.
And using the TXO framework to say where it belongs, right? Because otherwise you're going to have people talking about energy and other people are going to be talking about operations, and both
Right.
are valid, right? And some people have a high priority in operations, and other people can have a high priority on energy. So rather than trying to decide is energy or operations more important, no, this application fits in operations, this application fits in energy. You decide whether it's your priority or not. We don't have to worry about it, right? Just use that to categorize. So you're not putting priorities per se. And you don't have to say whether energy is more important than operations. That's a you know what I'm saying? So if a use case, a simple one, Anto. So like if you say, well, I'm really focused on energy and I'm really focused on load control, right? Well, clearly that load control is an application that we should consider, but it falls in under your total cost of energy, right? Operations, as opposed to, I might say, well, no, I'm really focused on resolving work orders, right? Which is, well, that obviously falls under the total cost of operations, has an energy impact, sure, but the real focus is total cost of operations. So I don't have to argue whether the load control or the operations one is higher value. Don't worry about it, right? That's the box it fits in. If that's important to you.
Because they are higher value to different people. That's exactly the point. Right.
Right. You got it.
Right.
So I would suggest we don't use the term application, because that are we talking about an actual software application? Are we talking an application of this information? I think when Anno shared use cases and user requirements, I think that might be a better way to categorize that for these three groups: the tenants, the operations team, and the owner asset manager team.
And use cases is because that way the beauty about use cases is you get to describe it in normal English. I want to do this for this person for these reasons.
Yeah, I in doing these in the past, we would do a day in the life and have user profiles of each, a person in each one of these groups.
Yeah, we create personas, and then we have wonderful arguments about, do they really want to do purple?
They don't need to know that.
That's right.
So you can have so owners, occupants, and operators to maintenance, operations, capital, and what did I forget? Maintenance, operations, capital, energy. Almost forgot it. So we'll standardize some of the language by using TXO as well. But I think at least some of us will be focused on the apps, because the apps are what people use. That's now the sort of and they understand use cases are attached to apps. I'll keep advocating for using the word apps, because people get that. They get it now, and then in 2020, what is it, 2022?
Well, I hear what you're saying, Rick, but I know so many operations people, especially in multifamily, where they have 12 different apps to manage their assets, and people hate having to go to this for this, this for this, this for this, this for this.
You've just supported the argument of thinking about them as apps. They're already doing so. The problem that they have is that the apps, the array of apps that they have doesn't make sense. They'd rather only have either one or two or three.
Yeah, but that becomes, again, from a perspective, if you do a use case, let's keep it simple. I want the ability to be able to add some numbers together or subtract numbers and draw a graph of the numbers that I've got. That's a use case, right? Someone's going to go, oh, what you need is a calculator app, and I'm going to go off and build a calculator app. But someone else is going to go off and go, no, what you need is a statistical analysis app, and that can let you do that, right? So the reason you've got multiple apps, many of those things solve a lot of the
Same
same
thing.
common use cases. Some try to do one app and try to do, I'm going to build one app that covers 3 different use cases. Okay, well, that's okay. If you think you're better at solving it that way. And then my
So
choice.
use cases is a better granular way of thinking about the things of
It's a
value.
need, right? I'm trying
Yeah.
to solve a need, right? I'm trying to add numbers together. I want to easily add numbers together and get the cosine of the value when I do so. Well, okay, I can invent 3 apps that do that. You tell me which one you like the best.
But when you put this together, Emma, when you put the applications, I guess you're looking at the title as being an umbrella. There may be a number of different applications under each of those. And I mean, we know there's different suppliers with all those sort of things. And today's case, you could be 10 different ones, in one application. But that use cases we're talking about will only have one. But if they've all got to start complying to the same thinking and mentality, then it becomes kind of easier. But I think the titles you put together, I guess, for me, I'm looking at it as an umbrella rather than an individual application as a title.
I mean, that's what you'll end up with. Like I have on my phone, right? I don't know, last count I had was some 99 different applications. I'm like, why the hell do I have 99 applications, right? And then you start going through them. I don't really. Oh no, but it's got a really cool feature and it does this. I'm going to keep it.
But you also have like 5 airline apps because you need those 5
That's right.
airlines because you fly with them.
Right.
So.
And I'm sure somebody could probably build an app that covers all the 5 airlines that I use in some context.
Like Travelocity.
Yet another app.
Travelocity. But at the end of the day, that's
Don't go there.
going to run. But at the end of the day, that's by doing what we're doing. That's what's going to result, and that's okay, right? So somewhere along the line, those apps someone will go like, yeah, my favorite crossword app doesn't cut it anymore. I want another crossword app. It still does crosswords. It still solves crosswords, but it's got a few extra features that I like, and I've killed the other one.
Yeah, the use case remains, but the apps
The use case
transitory.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well, I think this has been a great conversation and to figure out how we talk about silos. Somebody want to recap this? Ken, you've been very quiet.
Well, I've been thinking that everything everybody's been saying is all based on all of the silos having, back to my farming days, all of the silos having a common connection so we can actually get the data out of them. And I think that's probably our next task, is to try and identify and write some specifications around how that data, what is the fitting on the top of the silo that is a kind of a universal fitting that we can go across and grab the stuff and put it in the pipe, and then we can take it off to our apps and try and do something with it. That kind of thinking. So I think that's our next goal, is to work on that specification at that layer right above there. And I think we need to flush that out. My imagination kept going to the flat line of silos. I wanted to see where that information was going. Just even one piece of information, how it might come out of a silo or come out of several silos and become useful. I think that's the next slide.
Okay, that's what use cases are. It's kind of a way of doing that. It's kind of the method of doing that.
Yeah, actually, a slide showing how the use case is going to interact, but some standards I think need to be developed. Like how does Linux approach this? How is this going to be into a standardized Linux stream that's going to make that happen?
Okay, so that gives us a nice way of thinking about next week and the rest of July. So we'll work on this over the course of this week, and we will see everybody back here on next Monday. So let's wrap this. Thank you, everyone. We'll get
Have a great holiday,
YouTube
guys.
out soon, and have a
Happy
safe
4th of
July
July.
4th. Yeah, have a safe one.
I know.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.